Well, I read your.
Have all last people off. Running and on the one.
Really?
On the other side. So, no, it's not good, but and then I don't know. Word of mouth.
That's the private part. So you know, I carry this down.
That. And I got. Is my voice not loud? All right, so this is a not a formal school building committee meeting, so we're just gonna open it up and I'm gonna pass it right over to, Phil Conti with Studio G to take it and run with it, and, we'll, if people have questions as we go along, we can navigate that. But Phil, you want to take it away?
Great, thank you, Kate. So we have a interactive presentation that we're gonna walk through a number of things to get your input. So I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen now. Is that okay? Yes, okay. Okay. All right, well, thank you for joining us this evening. So as I mentioned, this does have interactive components throughout the presentation. So for folks at home, they can either enter in this website from their computer, or you could scan this code with your phone. If you want to participate, now would be the time to go ahead and click that website or scan that code. And we'll wait a minute or so until everybody gets well to speak.
We're getting kind of that goes in. So if we get people in. To see if they're coming.
If anybody has any problems, just raise your hand. You can run out and tell us. You good, Mike, or? You're not good. You might have to get closer, maybe. You don't have to take the picture. Oh, you're good.
I don't know.
Oh, all right. Anybody else? Everybody okay? Okay. Okay, so we do like to know who is participating, those in the room and those in cyberspace. So we'd like to know, how would you describe yourself? Parent or guardian, student, resident, educator, business partner? You can select as many that are applicable. Yeah, all of this data is dated too, so. Okay. All right. Next slide, we're interested in knowing whether this is your first time attending a public meeting regarding this project, or are you a seasoned veteran? You've been at it for a few years here now. Okay, so it's good to see some newcomers. So how would you describe your understanding of the project so far? Do you have a complete understanding? Are you somewhat knowledgeable, or you don't know anything about the project yet? Okay, glad to know that nobody knows nothing. So before we get into the presentation, the last question in this first grouping is, do you feel that your voice has been heard yet regarding your opinions or comments? All right, well, certainly at the conclusion of this meeting, we hope that one person may feel differently. If not, we will continue as we go through the process of the project. So rank the following in terms of importance to you. Regarding the beginning of this project, is it schedule and logistics? Is it the design of the high school? Is it sustainable features, or is it the athletic field design? This will just help us spend the appropriate amount of time on each one of these topics. For those that are joining us late, you can go to this website, menti.com, and enter that code if you want to participate.
That code is 5940-0715. Again, it's menti.com. MENTI, and the code is 5940-0715.
Okay, this is an open question. What do you want to learn more about today? We're going to talk about those topics. Maybe we've captured them all. But we want to make sure we know if there's something you're interested in that we may not be thinking of right now. And hey Chris, maybe you could help me by reading them all.
So, sure. So what do we want to learn more about today? First, we have site development, design of the high school, the time frame for the design,
And as we go through the presentation, we have other open-ended questions, but we will circulate a mic around to those who would feel more comfortable just asking a question instead of typing it.
another one, it's like time frame is going to be a big one, schedule to complete, alternative funding sources, expected start dates and logistical plans, what comes first, the school or the field, and of course, geothermal sustainability, but it looks like design and schedule are two big ones.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. And as I said, all of these are recorded so we can go back and review these. So we have a brief agenda. It's introductions. We'd like to have the goal setting for this meeting, talk about the activities that we've completed to date and the process going forward for the design, the opportunities and challenges that we are working with, and we will end with schedule and logistics and then next steps going forward. So for introductions, Kate, do you think we should just go around the table if you don't mind, and we'll go ahead and start with you?
Happy to do it. Kate Massanti, I'm the chair of the building committee.
Brian Maloney, I'm the vice chair of the building committee, and I'm at schools on the facilities and the transportation director. Dave, I'm a member of the school group. Give me any fashionably late. I'm making 30 minutes out of the perfect.
Luke Murray, under the building committee. Mark Moore, I'm the project manager from the Building Company.
Chris Spiegel, owner's project manager, for Left Project Manager.
And I'm Kathy Oldthorpe from Slam Collaborative Architects.
And my name is Philip Contes, Studio G. And we have another member of Left Field here as well. Brian from the town. Chair of the school committee is here. Mike Moran, town council, Littlefield. If I'm missing anybody, I apologize. Feel free to just stand up and introduce
I see
yourself.
several educators, if any of the educators want to raise their hand. There we go.
Excellent. So quickly just running down the work that we've started today has included interactions with the school building committee members, obviously left field, the owner project manager, Gil Bain is the construction manager, Studio J managing architect, Slam Collaborative, the architect of record, and Studio J, the engineer of record. So the goal of this meeting is to continue the community dialogue. If you are here to see what the design of the new high school looks like, you're several months too soon. That will be presented to school building committee, school committee, town council, the community around October-ish. All right, we're currently just soliciting feedback, doing our due diligence, developing the schematic design. So I want to set the expectations on that. This is really an opportunity for you to voice any comments or concerns you have so that the design team can incorporate those into the schematic design process. We want to spend a lot of time getting the schematic design right. We did a good job in stage 2, getting it to a point, but now we need to, expand that concept further. We're going to discuss the process and the expectations for the design review. Obviously, listen to any comments or concerns you have and then answer your questions. So the activities that we've completed to date, number 1 is the engagement of the construction manager, Gil Bain. And their work right now is primarily scheduling and logistics so that we will be prepared to build upon this occupied site. We've conducted our program validation by the design team, so the Slam Collaborative have met with the administration at the high school, validated what we have done previously, documented any changes, and they're moving forward. That information is informing the schematic design layout. And we are investigating sustainable features early, which is a big piece of this, planning for a geothermal test well, which we are anticipating around September. That is a big component to the whole sustainable approach to the high school.
Phil, before you go on, can you get into a little bit more, not terrible detail of program validation by design team? Just in speaking it on a high level, or we get it, but maybe the community might want to understand a little bit better what that entails so that they understand that it is about educational program.
Yeah.
Sure. Our program planners came and spent like 2 days, I think it was, here, talking to the educators and, other administrators, to get an understanding of anything that might be different from when, Phil and his team had done the original programming. It was a little while ago, right? Things change, curriculums change, sporting things and whatnot change. So it's really taking the time to meet with every different department, and they were all invited to come in and talk to us, hearing their concerns, their ideas, the things that they may have thought about or heard in different community forums that they wanted to bring forward and make sure that the design team's aware of as we start replanning. And it's not replanning on a grand scale because the planning was really good in the first place, but taking the information and updating it and just resynthesizing it with new eyes and with a little bit more detail than what had been done in stage 2, right? Stage 2, you're moving fast, you got a lot of things you gotta get done. Now we're taking our time and really going through it with a little bit more, methodical process. And that turns itself into a spatial set of, we call them chiclets. We actually make a graphic program so that every space is a little box in different colors by department. And our designers actually, we've got one who's very visual learner, and he relies on those chiclets to understand and make sure we didn't lose these spaces, are they in the right groupings, all that kind of stuff. There's also a program that's more Excel based. It's got square footages and what for those of us who deal a little bit more with numbers than visual aids. So all that's been done and it's been synthesized, and we're in the process of taking that, applying it to new programming, planning ideas, and we'll be starting our ground next week, I believe, with a first pass at sharing some information with some of the leadership.
Thank you for doing that. I also want, if we can clarify a little bit, as far as what the building is going to look like. Obviously, we've had draft pictures, concept drawings. It's kind of, I align it with when, when a car company comes out with their concept vehicles, and then when they actually come out with the vehicle, it looks not quite like the concept. A lot of people do share those pictures online, actually, we shared this today, and, you know, the general public has an idea of what we've been sharing. So I don't want people to get confused and be like, okay, we're starting from scratch, and that's not looking at, so just a little bit more detail around that.
So there are, that is a big component of this presentation. So I think we'll absolutely get to it. If not, we'll pick it up at the end. And I know that field has been instrumental in orchestrating some site visits to other high schools within the state and out of state as well. I don't know if you want to comment on that experience.
So sure, and this will tie into this title, Chris. This will tie into some of the questions that were also posed by community members and sent ahead of time that we'll address, but we heard the community loud and clear during the previous visioning processes, and you know, two things really stood out to us. One is that the new building needs to connect to the historical character of South Kingstown, right? We don't want an ultra modern building just being planted right on School Street, right next to right where Hazard Field is. That's not going to fit the character of this town. It's not what residents have said they want. And the other thing that we heard very, very loud and clear was that the theater, the arts, the music program are critical for this district, not just for the students, but also for the community as a whole. So having said that, we went and visited two schools. The first was Bellrica Memorial High School, which was recently completed, and actually just won an AIA award. They are known for having one of the best theater programs, auditorium programs in Massachusetts. So that was one school that we visited. We also visited BMC Durfee in Fall River. BMC Durfee is known for having a design that really connects to the history of Fall River. Now, obviously, the history of Fall River is different than the history of South Kingstown, but we wanted to see, to see how you can make connections to the past while also building new modern facilities that students want to use. So a couple of people that were on those tours or in those rooms, maybe if they could raise their hands and you guys could chat with them afterwards if you want, but I'm also here to also discuss.
Great, thank you, Chris. So some of the things that we're working through, we're maintaining the location of the high school. This is going to be an occupied site, so we recognize constraints with buildings and fields that we're working with, making sure that we include the program and curriculum requirements. There was some discussion on maintaining flexibility through our planning, the CTE programs, making sure that we try to be as universal and flexible as possible for changes in the future. Obviously, as Chris just mentioned, incorporating the public amenities such as the auditorium, we know that that's very important. And then, you know, planning for growth, be it enrollment or the impact of artificial intelligence or changes in CTE programs. These are all the things that the design team is keeping in mind as they're working through that schematic design process. So I do want to explain quickly the process of what will happen. So right now we're in the schematic design phase. That is one of 3 phases. And as I mentioned, we're looking to finish our schematic design at the end of September, do some cost estimating in October, and present it out to everybody around the end of October, beginning of November. And we will move into design development and then construction documentation. So each one of these submissions is estimated and then reviewed by the school building committee, the school committee, the town council, and the RIDE School Building Authority. So there are a number of gateways that we will be going through during this process.
One thing I'd also like to set expectations on is that it's completely normal and it's definitely part of the process for the design to change between schematic design and what is ultimately being built. Schematic design is a much more programmatic exercise, right? We want to make sure that we have the right spaces in the right places that allow teachers to teach how they want to now and also teach for the further. But as we get through these checkpoints, we're going to go from a schematic design, which is largely conceptual, to a construction documentation set where we're literally going to tell you where every single tree is going to be on the site. So that is the level of detail that we get as we go further down in this process. So I just want to be clear about that expectation. SD, things will change. As we get to CDs, things don't change once we finalize that construction document.
Thank you, Chris. You know, I just want to mention something that Kate talked about in terms of the renderings. Technology is a tremendous tool for us as designers and engineers to be able to model the building, test concepts, run it through energy analysis and all kinds of other things. The problem is, very early on, we make a building that looks very finished. And that's never the case. So you've seen a lot of renderings, we're gonna show some of them tonight, because we want to hear your concepts. But understand that that is our use of technology in a way to help you visualize what could be. But as the design team start pushing and pulling things will change, as Chris mentioned. So some of you may have participated in this over a year ago, where we had some presentations at the high school cafeteria, where people were able to comment, like you're going to be able to do this evening, on things that were important to them. And I'll read some of these: sustainability, traditional, recognizing the opportunity for geothermal, having the gym by the fields, making the school very efficient, auditorium, assembly spaces, CTE spaces are important, outdoor classroom, outdoor dining. So we did not lose sight of this work that we did three years ago. Oh my God, sorry, a year ago. We started this 3 years ago, but a year ago we did this. And it's all very valid still, and definitely something we continue to reference. So we'll familiarize yourself with an aerial view here of Hazard Field, the high school, the Hazard Building, where School Street is, Columbia Street, etc. Just so that you have a reference point. As we start developing the design conceptually, the school is developing very similar to how it was developed in the stage 2. One thing that we're exploring now is the interstitial space between Hazard and the building. What could that possibly turn into? So that's something that we're continuing to develop, but maintaining the entrance to the school, facing School Street, etc. Having these major spaces separated so you can have public events separate from the school. So this is the conceptual site plan. Hazard Field is to the north, top of the plan, and then this is the conceptual site plan as it was in the stage 2. This is something that we are developing and revising. So what I want to do is give you the opportunity to comment on things that you see here, either features that you prefer, don't prefer, concerns or comments you have. So I'm going to go to this screen here. On your phone, and people at home, they're seeing the whole site plan. Here you just see that little snippet. But I want to open it up for any comments or questions, also live. So if you have a comment or question, raise your hand. We'll run a mic out to you. There you go. Got our first.
Bill, you can put that picture up again, that has to do with the left.
Yes. Yeah. The brown roof in the image is the Hazard Building.
Hi, my name is Paul Romero. I'm the bonus dad of the disabled adult. And I really hope that the community is enough forward thinking and long-term value oriented so that incorporated in the design will be truly acceptable features. Some of the folks here for taking past meetings voiced that compliance with provision of the ADA does not truly equal acceptability. You've got to do more to be truly acceptable. For instance, door openers. Having a door that meets ADA doesn't necessarily mean someone in a wheelchair with compromised strength and mobility is going to be able to open the door. So your accessible bathrooms, at least some of them, need to have openers, preferably with touchless switches for people who have reduced strength and mobility. Another really good feature to incorporate in the original building would be at least the capacity to have ceiling mounted lifts in some of the bathrooms, because at some point in the 50-year life of this building, there are going to be students who require the assistance of a lift to transfer to toilet. Also, people from the community might need this for using the auditorium, for sports facilities. It'd be really good to incorporate something like that into design originally, rather than have to retrofit it. Might upset parents, get lawyers, perhaps even sue the town to get compliance with this. Another good thing to keep in mind is 36-inch doors, which generally meet EPA compliance, too small for someone in a big pumper chair. Go to 14-inch door, go to 42-inch door, or design bathrooms that don't have doors at all, and just have screening so that you can get in and out. Stalls typically, the ADA compliance, are big enough for someone who would be a wheelchair racer for marathons, with a body strength can take care of themselves. No good for someone with compromised health, who has a caretaker, who needs to get in there with them, maneuver a power chair, transfer them on and off the toilet. So I really hope by the time you get to your construction design, you've incorporated truly accessible features. Also, please don't have any of the right angle railings that you see still in new construction. Make sure every corner on every railing is released. I could tell you more, but I'm not going to take more time right now. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, a couple things that I'm going to talk about. First, thank you very much. The first thing I would like to say is, a lot of people on this committee know this, maybe other too, but you should also know that I am the father of a disabled son. I serve on the Special Education Advisory Committee in the town that I live in, and we have an advocate on this group as part of the project team that will ensure that these things are thought about and that we thoughtfully design the building for these things. But one of the things that you want to touch on that we are doing, and I think it's part of what Kathy talked about, is that when we look at this design, one of the things that Kathy is doing right now is we're not just looking at the building, how people teach now, how the building is used now, it's how we're going to be using this building 10, 15, 20, 50 years from now. And that I think is one of the most important parts about Kathy's and her team's job about going into these buildings, is to understand how the building can be flexible and adaptable. So you're right, we don't have to come back in and do very expensive retrofits when a lawsuit is threatened, or we don't have to build additional classrooms onto the building because you have a brand new school. Generally, brand new schools attract more families to come into districts like that. So we are thinking about the future. So I just want to assuage you on those two counts that yes, you have an advocate and we are thinking about the future, but please remain engaged and advocating throughout the project.
So we'll go through some of these comments that we see here. If someone else has a comment in the audience, please raise your hand. Is there any plan to integrate gardens at the school? Yes. Drainage is a big concern. There's a number of, yes, sir.
Could you put up the full view picture of how it feel with the school?
Yes. Oh, with that.
Okay, my name is Bob Cadman, I'm the athletic director of the school department, retired. I lived, one street over from the high school most of my life on Oak Street. I spent a lot of time on Madison Field as a child and coach. If you look to the right of the, schematic you have up there, the open space, I would say it's to the east of the high school on the right hand side. Just need to make you aware, we know this, but that's all fit. Okay, that was filled in. And if you look to the very edge of the high school on the right, or I believe the east side, that was a field that dropped considerably, and there was flooding in the School Street apartments that are right adjacent to that field, and they tried to remedy that in the early 1980s. And leveled the entire field. And that piece you see in the right-hand corner, upper right-hand corner next to the high school, drawing there, that's where a lot of the runoff went. So anybody that's there now will notice that after heavy rainfall, that's a wet area. But the problem we had there was a lot of the water ran off the Hazard Field, so occasionally the School Street apartments flooded. But it ran down the road and went to the corner of Oak Street and School Street. That's the street I live on. And the first lot, yes, exactly, right there, that first lot on the corner, that floods. And if you look to across the street, not the house on the corner across the street, but the one to the lower right-hand corner of that entire picture, there's houses there, but that's also a swampy area, so the people have water irrigation is continually. So I think great care needs to be taken with the drainage of the project.
One thing on that, we have had discussions with the Department of Public Service Director Rich Gourmet on that issue, and we are aware of the drainage issues that have happened in the past, so he advised me early on that subject, and we're gonna work with the engineer to figure out a better situation.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, where is the entrance for large events, large sporting events and large auditorium events? The parking up front and in the back seems, I don't know if it seems small, but for large, if there's a big, say like a huge dance recital, we just had one, or a large theater production, or, when the basketball team has a big game coming up. A lot of times that our back parking lot, the senior lot, which is, does anyone know how many people, how many cars, how many cars? Hundreds, is like chock full. So is there enough parking for large events? And where is the entrances for all that stuff? Like if there's a volleyball game and a theater performance, can they coexist or?
So that's part of the design process that we're working through, making sure that we can easily do two things. Get people in and out of the building safely and properly. Also segregate public spaces from the academic spaces. We don't want people going into other parts of the school. And then recognizing that there are going to be compromises on this site with distribution of parking, et cetera. The idea is to maintain a simple and clear egress and access to public spaces and public events.
Yeah, I think that's just a big thing right now, if the one parking lot is overflowing, you have to go to the first level. You have to kind of, all around the building on this really narrow road, dangerous. So just making sure that when there are big events, there's enough spaces for people to go or find another path to get to that space. That's important.
Hi, I'm working with the town planning district and advisory committee, kind of just gonna jump on with the parking because currently there's inadequate parking at the high school, and so students park along Kingstown Road on both sides where Old Mountain Field is, and that's gonna be going through some renovation shortly. So we suggest or recommend that because there's a dangerous crossing situation for parking, that the town look at complete streets and trying to make safe egress for students that can't fit into the parking lot. Also, we wanted to talk about, maybe this is not, all right. All right, let's see what I can do. Okay. That also the design of the exterior areas of the building should include infrastructure and facilities for safe storage of bikes and scooters. But programming of a high school still relies on using Old Mountain Field for recreational purposes, and so that's still happening. And we need to make sure that it's safe for people to cross. As far as the interior areas of the building should include designated interior storage spaces for students who wish to walk or ride to school or use e-bikes. And so this is required to be consistent with the school department's policy to compel students within a certain radius to walk or ride to school. I don't know if that is good, if that's correct. Is it a mile? Maybe sure to walk to school, there's no bus service. So I think that's something we need to take a look at.
The other suggestions are kind of outside of the school, but just the town, work on, safe streets leading to school, so that students who do want to walk and bike to school can do so safely.
Thank you. So some of the other comments, and again, these are going to be recorded here, so we'll be able to reference them. Notes, go.
Thanks so much. I sent this comment to Kate and we got a nice response, so, maybe it's already on your radar, but the, Inflation Reduction Act has a number of non-committed dollars to help fund, pieces of things, so, of like the geothermal. So it's meant to, you are not, you probably don't know, to bring the price point down to something competitive with like a more traditional system. And I just wanted to, like, one recommendation that you see online is to have like an Inflation Reduction Act team to make sure we're capturing all that, but no one wants to sign up for extra committees if the design team is already on it and like taking advantage of all those pieces.
So a couple things to know about that. So my firm, Left Field, is going to be working on an alternative funding analysis. But the important thing to know about things like the Kingstown Act or the bipartisan infrastructure bill, there's lots of different avenues, is that generally, in most cases, the town or the project has to outlay the money first, and then they get reimbursed on the back end of the project. So we need to do a cost benefit analysis to see if we can afford doing these things on the front end to be reimbursed on the back end, because if we're gonna outlay $40 million on something, and that means we have to build a smaller school and then get reimbursed $40 million on the back end of the project. That $40 million is great, but the school's already built. How can we incorporate? So I guess what I'm trying to say is a lot of thought will go into it. And we are planning on having the school building committee review that proposal and then helping us make decisions. That's a big part of this geothermal well that we're about to do, which we're gonna get into in a little bit more detail on that. But that geothermal well, the test well, will allow us to know just how many geothermal wells we need, what the cost would be, things like that. So a whole cost benefit analysis will be undertaken on just that, including looking at the bipartisan infrastructure act as well as the Inflation Reduction Act feature too. And we've already also engaged Rhode Island Energy and looked at their incentives as well to see how they can help us out as well. So there's a lot of moving pieces, but yes, it's being considered.
Thanks. And in terms of cooling the building, is that all integrated, like projections of future temperature, since you can't rely on our past temperature?
So that's a great question. That's pretty hot today. Well, my MVP expert will be looking into that, but when we do a cost benefit analysis, how far are they going? 20 years, right? It's a 20-year life cycle cost analysis. So we'll be looking at 20-year energy usage and things like that. So let's hope that it doesn't jump too much in 20 years, but it'll be considered as part of the account.
Thank you.
So some other comments on here, what's the current capacity of the auditorium? I think there's probably what we're planning for gathering spaces. I believe the design team is working towards an initial capacity of 750 in our schematic design process. The number of parking spaces that will be continually worked through with our site civil engineer. This is a multi-story building. We do anticipate I can't touch my screen. So I saw some of those questions on here. We do anticipate a multi-story building. Typically, what we're thinking right now, the academic portion of the building will be a 3-story building. And the others will be appropriately sized. Not higher, no, we have not been successful planning for that. In terms of expansion of footprint, you want to identify an area that you could add on to in the horizontal direction.
To the question about biking, I also want to say you have an advocate. Sorry, about biking. You have an advocate in me as well. Here's my bike ride from today, 14 miles. So I'm on your side.
All right, let's go on to the next slide. So a couple of years ago, we also did a community forum exercise where we sort of ranked, I don't know, 50 or 60 high schools throughout the world on the aesthetics, on which, you preferred at that time. This one and this one were the top two, which sort of indicated to us, you want us to maintain the type of materials that we find in town, the massing and the shapes, but also introduce some of the modern components that we would expect to see in a new building. These were the top two. I will show you the bottom two, so you know that this is not what we're going to do, right? So no worry about seeing a building like this, land on Hazard Field, or one that looks like that.
Those are two great buildings.
So I want you to be mindful of that. So I do want to, again, give the opportunity for any comments or concerns. We have other things in the presentation to go through. There'll be other opportunities for comments or concerns, but I want to make sure you all have the voice, the opportunity to voice your opinion. And have we seen any hands raised on Zoom yet? No, okay. Oh, okay, one of the schematics, and this is an opportunity to do this anonymously as well. So, the schematics are heavily branded with the Rebel logo, but that mascot has been controversial given its association with the Confederacy. Recommend not investing heavily in those signs. Good point. All right, well, then there'll be other opportunities for open questions here. I do want to just share some of the buildings in town and give you an opportunity to say, I love blank about that building, or I don't like something about the building. But this is the context that the design team is referencing in addition to your comments. So one being the town hall. And if there's any comments, feel free to share.
Welcome to the native stone.
He said he loves the native stone. All right. The library, ditto. Yes, you were absolutely correct. So go ahead, but maybe you want to, let the gentleman make his comment again.
Hi, I'm just saying, it's the 21st century. I mean, I love the buildings of the URI, a lot of lead buildings that they've constructed. And I don't know why we have to be focused on mimicking the past, or especially the old high school.
Sure, and actually I have that, in case anyone thinks that there may be any redeeming qualities. So.
So this building is Art Deco, and I happen to really like Art Deco, but my personal opinions aside, I agree, I understand what you're trying to say, is that we don't want to build buildings like we had previously where there's not that much natural light, right? They're very dense buildings. We're trying to create buildings that both fit in with the neighborhood, represent the architectural history of South Kingstown. We don't want them to stand out, but we do also want them to have all of those modern elements like you would see in some of the new URI buildings, which is ample glass, that you get a connection to the outdoor environment with the indoor environment. Plenty of natural light so that students and teachers can teach in natural light, which is improved time and time again to improve student outcomes. Better acoustics that are associated with not having such packed and dense. But more importantly, we're going back to flexibility. When you look at some of these older buildings, and South Kingstown High School is a great example of that, is these buildings were built at a certain time in American history, during the baby boom, when we were trying to build schools very quickly and very cheaply to deal with a rapidly increasing population. To do so, to build these buildings, we are built primarily of heavy masonry, both on the exterior and the interior. When you have heavy masonry walls on the interior of the building, it means that it's very hard to change the design of that building for flexible spaces, right? Because knocking out a heavy masonry wall could cause substantial problems on the inside. So one of the things that Kathy and her team and Phil are doing, again, ties back to flexibility. So again, try to respect the historical architectural styles of the neighborhood, make sure that the building doesn't stand out, right? Isn't something that stands out too much from the neighborhood, but also incorporating all of those modern elements that you would see in these buildings like you are on, which is ample casework and ample glass and things like that to bring them to the natural elements. I'm not an architect, so.
So again, I want to offer the opportunity for questions and comments.
Barbara Burma again. With regard to glass. It's probably cost prohibitive. If you're using a lot of glass, then have glass that is proof against terrorist activities. And so I think the design process, where and how they use glass, that's a consideration because glass hurts people when it gets shattered.
So a requirement of this project prior when we submit to RIDE is to meet with what's called AHJs, which are authorities having jurisdiction. Which means that we'll be meeting with South Kingstown Police, South Kingstown Fire, and they will be giving us their input on how they see this building being designed for student and teacher and staff safety. So we'll have those discussions. You are right though, glass. There are ways though of tempering and films and things like that keep them from being shattered, but that's all very detailed discussions for later on.
I'm Jay Butcher. I just wanted to thank you for having this community meeting. Really important to have a space where the community can come out and tell you what we think, and just wanted to thank you for coming out. I wanted to comment that a building that I thought was really beautiful was East Providence High School, the new high school. I went to a lacrosse game for my cousin and Les Mis Junior, which I highly recommend you all see at some point in life, Les Mis Junior. But the building itself is beautiful. It is not gaudy. It is a testament to good design. So if folks want to see a good modern school, East Providence High School is a model for that. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Anybody else right now?
Bill, before we go on, we did have one comment come in through Zoom about just asking about the library, is it gonna be adequately sized, is it gonna be, enough room? So I don't know if you want to talk just very briefly about the media center thoughts as it sits now.
Maybe for Kathy to see if you guys had any discussions with the design team regarding the media center.
Yep, we had with the, I'll say you have a forward-thinking media specialist, which is nice for us, to engage with people who are forward-thinking, right? Because media and library design has evolved a lot in the last 10 years. And there's a lot more that we see, that's probably going to happen in those kinds of spaces going forward. Books are still really important, and media centers typically have some, but they're not the libraries that they used to be, which house volumes of things, because that was the only way we could share our knowledge. They're a lot more about communication spaces, I guess I'll call them, where there's we call them one-button studios sometimes, where there's a small space with technology where students can go in and quickly record, because recorded media is becoming more and more important in sharing your ideas in an educational environment with your students, with your teachers, places for them to go in and be able to either individually or a small group make those kinds of recordings with standard technology that then you go to the classroom, you hit the button in the classroom and you can all see it, right? You're not spending 15 minutes trying to figure out how to make it come back up and share it. Media specialists these days are also, I'll say, more media centric, and being able to help students navigate all the new technologies that are coming in. AI, who knows what AI is going to do for us in the future? I'm sure it's going to have a big influence. A maker space kind of environment is often something that we see media specialists asking for, either in or adjacent to their media centric space and also the opportunity to satellite some of those, functions out across the building. So it's not always going to one specific area to get your technology, to get your, media specialists are helping students learn how to do research. And so that they get research for, papers and projects that they're doing that they know is accurate and true, and how to vet the things that might not be out there. So, of all the spaces in the building, I would say media spaces are libraries, whatever, words everybody's familiar with. They probably change the
Yeah, it's
most
the most dynamic.
of any of the traditional spaces that we have. So a very good question. Thank you to the Zoom person.
Some other comments on the screen, solar with a question mark, so we will be making sure that the building is absolutely ready for photovoltaics, whether that is the structure on the roof or making sure that we have the infrastructure for the electric. The only way this building can get close to net zero is it needs two pieces. It needs to have a geothermal system and you need to introduce photovoltaics. If you don't have either one of them, you'll never get to net zero. We're taking the first step in geothermal with the test well. Photovoltaics can come later. We're gonna have the infrastructure for it. Another question about a weight room incorporated into the high school. I know in the program you do have a fitness room in addition to a gymnasium. And some other comments on bicycle storage and the aesthetics. So I'm gonna go through a series of the renderings that you've seen so far, and again, they're just conceptual, because the design team is like clay in their hand, molding this and changing it and moving it around and shaping it. So I wanna run through these and then ask you to comment whether you like a feature, don't like a feature. What you don't like is just as important to us as what you do like, right? So we don't come back with something. And we have our first comment.
So. Thank you. I'm curious about what our kitchen space will look like. I have this sort of vision of the kitchen space being big enough to provide potentially culinary arts, or even just a space where teachers, math teachers, reading teachers could use that space as projects, learning projects, through food. And so I wonder how big that kitchen space is going to be, and if it would be able to accommodate, 9 over 10 to 15 students to be in that space at one time for that learning experience.
So one of the things that we did visit when we were at BMC Durfee, the new high school in Fall River, is they have a serious culinary arts program. They have sort of a restaurant on site. A lot of those probably we're not going to be able to incorporate into our project, but a lot of the individual project elements certainly can be considered. One thing that we saw that was pretty cool was they actually had cameras that faced down above your pots, basically, when you're cooking. And what it allowed people to do was actually watch how recipes were made and were constructed. So that's kind of like a short money way of being able to perhaps, stream that into a different classroom as opposed to providing classroom space and spreading the building, because we're talking about kitchen spaces that can be very expensive. They have a lot of code requirements, but we're at a very early point in the process of Chair. And that's something that we can consider now, and we can see down the line if it's able to stay within the design or not. But I think it's worth considering for sure. But culinary arts program spaces are usually very highly mission specific and very expensive, so we need to consider that. I just want to set the expectation.
I'll just add that request was shared during programming meetings. So, we are taking that to heart, and we've got some ideas, not necessarily with a large group, but maybe with some smaller groups with, some other facilities that are already needed in the building.
I did advance the slide in case someone wanted to make an anonymous comment. It's okay, you will not hurt my feelings. That's okay. Been here 3 years now, so it's all right, it's all right, I can handle it. Yes.
You mentioned there's gonna be one gymnasium, like, now we have a small gymnasium and a mini annex gymnasium. Are we going to be seeing something a little larger and two separate places for not only phys ed classes, but for sporting events and practices? Many of the new schools have two gymnasiums where you can hold practice on one and games in the other site. You don't lose time or valuable practice.
So there are currently, there's a gym, and it's called a name, and a fitness room still in the program. And when I say still in the program, we are being conscious of the size of the building and the size of the budget that we're designing to, and figuring out the layout of how it's going to work. What we did here, you know, that wrestling is an important sport here, and obviously they have mats that we can be, or is best that they can be left out. So being able to accommodate that in a secondary gym, I'll call it secondary just because it'll be smaller than the primary, is still in the mix of what we're pushing and pulling and stacking and squeezing onto the site and such right now. So those are, none of those have been compromised yet.
So yeah, just to follow up on Kathy's point. So having spaces like that, or like a wrestling room, the aerobic studio, things like that are absolutely go. But if we're talking about two gyms that both have bleachers, Ryan won't pay for that. I just fought that fight in a different district, trying to do that. So you will not have two full-size gyms, in the same high school. They won't let you do it. They will let you do specialized spaces though, or ultimately flexible spaces like an aerobics wrestling studio, something like that.
I'd like to make a request. We put the auxiliary gym at the high school. We put in I call it glorified linoleum. It's called Top Cat. And it was inexpensive, and that's why it was put down, but it rendered that auxiliary gym useless for most of our activities, especially when we have climate change from winter to spring or fall to winter. We had condensation on the floor. They couldn't use it. They found a substance to put on the floor that remedied that for a while. But then again, we put basically the same thing on our recreation center, and anybody that uses a recreation center knows that it's a godsend to this community. But once again, we have that on the floor, and it limits the activities that you can have. So I would or some substance that's similar seems to be still the best way to go. There may be more things than that, and I've been retired for a while.
All right, some comments here, more student involvement, absolutely. Definitely, as we develop the schematic design for rollout at the beginning of the school year, we'll have that opportunity to engage with those students, and I know Chip would support that and the administration completely. Comment here about the vertical windows, large windows would be nice. About what will the building look like at nighttime? So as I mentioned, the technology that's available to us, we'll be able to show you what this building looks like on a cloudy day, sunny day, and at night. So that's a good point that we will be mindful of as we develop the design in these renderings. Again, just another rendering from the other side for comment and opinion. One from the back. Again, this is all subject to change, but giving you some ammunition to comment on. This is a very difficult building because it has multiple fronts, right? It's got School Street, which is the main facade. It's got the Hazard Field side, which is going to be completely exposed. And then you have the interaction between the Hazard building and the new high school. So it's a wonderful design change. And we're super excited to come back to you in a month or so with our first concept. So I want to give you, again, some opportunities for anonymous or virtual.
If you could explain, I think the masonry is pretty obvious, but could you maybe explain later what the darker shades are, what those could potentially be made out of, whether it's panels or something more?
Sure, and Kathy can add to this, but as we look at the exterior material of the building, you can expect that an all-stone building is just cost prohibitive. An all-masonry building is cost prohibitive. So there are other exterior materials such as cementitious panels and metal panels. You referenced East Providence High School that has cementitious panels and brick, for example. So I'm confident that the design team will further study all of these elevations on which material is best for that exposure, which material is best for vandal resistance, etc. Kathy,
I concur.
okay. And you have options, obviously, with cementitious panels and metal panels for any color to complement masonry and stone, etc.
And you want different textures and colors, because it breaks up the mass. It all doesn't look so.
Oh, that company, but you're not.
I'm not.
There's a couple of non-architects in the room, but their voice should be heard, and this one in particular thinks it looks a little disjointed and lacks a visual flow. I would not disagree. I would like to prevent overflow parking from going out to open fields. Oh, sure, okay, yeah, stop students from joyriding across the grass. We certainly, don't want that. Oh, go ahead and, another question, a couple of questions.
The CPE and arts space in the original plan, and I know it was just an initial plan, it had ceiling heights of 9 feet. And just in the rendering that we had. And in CPE spaces and in music spaces, large ceilings are good, especially building 2 stories where you can see stuff generally. And same thing with music, you need just high ceilings, and I'm wondering if that is.
That's being incorporated into the design.
Yeah, so one in the picture, but before this, it goes down significantly from the auditorium. And so I just want to make sure that that's being accommodated.
Yes.
Thank you.
Guys. I was just wondering if you could refresh my memory, what was the plan for the hazard building? Is it permanent or?
So the RIDE Stage 2 application included projects at the hazard building so that South Kingstown would be eligible for reimbursement, whether they did that project now or within the next 5 years. Right now, we are not programming anything in the hazard building that is necessary for the high school. That could change, but right now, we're not.
What's it being used for now?
Right now, there's a couple administration offices in there, as well as alternative learning program is in the hazard building.
Transition program.
Yeah.
Will there be dark sky certified lighting when possible? We're going to be following New England CHIPS. We're going to be doing, we have a lighting consultant who will be required to do lighting analysis and put candles around the perimeter of the building as we start approaching property lines, etc. Are you familiar with dark sky certified?
I'm not sure what the parameters of that are, but we have to. have,
So the dark sky is basically cut off, most fixtures today are LED fixtures and downlight dark sky compliant, so. Most of our design regs require it now, so it would be dark sky compliant. There we go.
Yes.
I'm assuming it's like not having a bright LED light for 24 hours, right?
Into the
No,
neighborhood.
it's all about the cutoffs and, you know, how you regulate it, and so. Yeah, avoiding light pollution, it's not a big issue in Rhode Island, but you go up to Mass, Foxborough, those communities, there's whole boards and commissions dedicated to that.
We put up our first, outdoor lighting for athletic events. The neighbors were concerned about spillover, so they couldn't see the venue or the lights, from one street over. It worked out. And I'm sure it still can be worked out.
Right, is another elevation that spurs any opinion? One thing we do think is gonna be important is the transition between the building and the new building and the hazard building, and then affording outdoor opportunities for dining and learning, et cetera.
And see the stair tower with the, high enough so there's probably access to the roof, is the roof being used for anything other than potential future solar installation?
Correct. Right now, it's just planned for future solar installations. And access to the roof is great.
We can go back to, for those of us that may know this year, I was here, the auditorium is, or the music spaces, but for someone who is new here, who doesn't know some of the slides we just got, just quickly go through the main entrance, auditorium, blah, 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 because that last slide of hazard that we had there makes no sense to us. Like, is that on the history? What's the perspective?
This is the roadway between the new hazard field and the new high school. Looking back at it from
So that's the back of the sentence. Help me understand.
That's, the person that took that picture would be standing on Hazard Field,
Okay,
sort of outside the cafeteria of the existing school.
okay.
let me see, this image might be better to explain. Columbia is to the far right of this plan. Where you see the green field, that's the existing high school.
That's actually
Like across the cafeteria.
Okay. See that corner, okay.
So, as I mentioned, yes, this is the back of the school, but it is still a very visible elevation.
So we need to wipe out the whole high school, this one.
Oh, yes, it's gone.
So it's gone in your fields with
How do you deal with elevation difference with? Where they elevate, the real high school, basically, when you walk out the basement, you want.
This is what we're here on the.
Yeah, there is an elevation change between, the field and the parking area in front of the high school. So either gonna lose that space or.
So there may be, it may be a plateau field, one large high section, and then it would slope down to a very large lower section. That's what our civil engineer is working on. It could be entirely flat with then a retaining wall across the back. So those are concepts we're exploring from a design standpoint and from a cost standpoint. We bring back the best solution possible. Regarding other elevations, that's kind of why we started to introduce these ideas of some retaining walls, because we do think that will be necessary to navigate the elevation change of the building. But to your comment, let me see if I can go back to here. The front entrance is along School Street. So the road that you see running left to right is School Street. Typically, and even if the design evolves, we're going to be walking into the main entrance, where we're probably going to be able to go to large public spaces. Will be managed by the administration. Then beyond that is likely the student commons and the cafeteria and kitchen area that would probably look out onto the new hazard fields. And to the left is what we're calling the academic tower. And then to the right, maybe this volume where you don't see windows, that's the auditorium. And then where you see some glass behind it, that's the gymnasium. And then the spaces to the right are probably those higher ceiling CTE spaces that want direct access to either bring equipment in or the arts where you're bringing in piano or something like that.
So while the spaces, like we said, are gonna change between what Kathy and her team is doing to what we have here. Some of the concepts that Phil's talking about, again, won't change, right? We're talking about, this large mass right here in the center without windows, that's a gymnasium, you know? There'll be a gymnasium, there'll be double height spaces for the construction program and things like that, you know, smaller spaces. We're trying to have all the spaces allow natural light to the best they can. Most of the teaching and learning spaces are on the outside of the building, things like that won't change, but this design, will. This is not the final design.
Yes.
Here with all the facilities, campus, from the school board, they come massively for maintenance and repair of this complex, within the complex.
I may refer that to Brian, because he manages many more schools than just this.
So currently, we do have a separate offsite facility, in town, we keep on large things, but then vehicles, plows, and the day-to-day tools, we have a workshop there. We're prepping the site, but each building does have maintenance equipment in it. Usually in custodial rooms or boiler kind of room areas, utility rooms, we do keep on-site maintenance equipment for every building, so. Paint, ceiling tiles, the day-to-day, and then anything specialized, we do back at our new shop, which is a separate facility.
All right, some other comments here. Will there be an opportunity for courtyards? Maybe, we'll see. What percentage of space is being used for athletics versus arts? I don't know that off the top of my head. Kathy mentioned that when we do our space programs, that has all the numbers in it. That's where we'll be able to tell you that information. All right, so the comment on courtyards. We are looking towards outdoor learning spaces, may not be enclosed in a courtyard. Didn't know if that was your thrust of the question.
Courtyards are expensive. They're expensive to build. They're difficult to build. So if we're talking about outdoor learning spaces, absolutely, 1000%. Courtyards is a more difficult conversation.
So I opened it up to another question and comment sheet. Well, why a flat roof? Would an angled additional roof line be more advantageous for solar? So a flat roof is perfectly fine for solar. The idea of an angled roof, I know is something that the design team is working on because we've had those discussions. The challenge there is justifying the cost as it relates to the volume of space that you may not be needing to use if we're using a certain mechanical system, et cetera. We don't need this volume underneath the angled roof. So it's part of the design evolution. And we'll take your comments under consideration. So I do want to spend some time talking about the athletic fields at Curtis Corner. So this is Curtis Corner Middle School. You see Curtis Corner Road, you see your existing field. This was the site plan that was in our stage 2. The dashed white line that you see within the center of the image and then going off and coming back is approximately the wetlands that have been delineated by our biologists. Now that has all been documented and our surveyor has the exact locations. I just overlaid it on the plan so that you could see. But we are looking for an 8-lane track. that has those areas for long jump and high jump, et cetera. That was a comment that we received in, one of the RSVPs we looked at. They referenced the hammer throw. I don't know where that goes, but I can tell you that we do have a specialized sport consultant on our team that's going to be working with the administration and school department and the rec department to make sure that what we provide here is what we're looking for. I want to make sure everybody understands that the building at the bottom that says future field house is not part of this project. But we want to be mindful that it could be built and added to the site at an appropriate time. Then I identified the existing administration building. So again, this plan needs work as well. But I want to give you the opportunity to ask questions or comment.
Would you put up the original work, please? Okay. The reason I am here tonight is because my former boss, superintendent of schools, Arthur Campbell, handed me a folder when he retired. And in that folder was all the litigation that took place, when the present athletic field was built in the early 1980s. Not that I want to get myself told. And I'm sure, the town may be aware that, in the early 1980s, when that was built, the track itself was completed, but was in litigation for over a year. There were multiple lawsuits with the, neighbors, the people who built it, and the people who designed it, the town, the school department. It was, all settled, and, I'm sure the town has the documents. I know the school department, had them. That settled all of those lawsuits, and eventually the track was opened up. The problem was, when you're looking at that track right now, and I'm not sure from the design that you have for the new one, where that field is the parking lot on top of that field? Okay.
And the concept is,
Okay.
I can go to that when you're ready.
Okay, no, not yet, but that's why I'm here. Because when that field was first built, to the lower right-hand corner of that track, flooded those neighborhoods to the point where the front page of the Narragansett Times had boats floating tied up to their clothes poles. And that's basically what caused all the litigation. It was remedied, by Ernie Willett, and they had engineers look at it for quite a while, and everybody was trying to figure out what to do. And what they did was they put a pipe directly from the lower end of that track toward Curtis Farm, and it's underneath the ground, to the drainage system in the stream. Okay, I'm sure that's documented somewhere, but what's probably not documented is the original drainage system is still in place, but it's buried. One of the projects I was involved in, we put a channel drain on the inside of that track. So the water came down from the building and the field in the back, it would go across the track into that channel and out through that goes to the street. And when that was done, it's pretty much solved, the track getting wet. That was done. Track itself was built in the early 80s, and around 2000, I think, is when we finally got the drainage a little bit better on that track. But the main thing is, I was told by one of the engineers that looked out the last time, that those drains that are underneath that field, as well as the channel drains themselves, big on leach field for that whole area. So I think that I'm not an engineer, I just know what happened the last time. If you put parking lot on top of that, you may end up with the same problem we had years ago. And I know a lot of other school systems are putting new tracks, East Greenwich, along, we didn't open up for a long time. They're telling my boss told me, make sure everybody can have this day.
Sure, and that's one of the reasons why we wanted to start this and continue this dialogue, so that knowledge such as that can be passed on and we can be reminded of some of the serious things that we need to be considering when we do this. Our engineers are just starting to look at this in more detail with probably some drainage pits that we're going to be digging, and as well as working with the town engineer.
And if you look behind the administration building, I don't know if I can see it in the drawing, there's a pond. It's a man-made pond, and that man-made pond, has an earthy dam with it. I think it's registered with the town now. That earthy dam, that pond remedy a lot of that situation too, because the water that goes up the top part of that track and in the back there ends up in that stream that goes to that earthy dam. So that pond, that earthy dam, so that has to be protected, kept as well. I'm sure you're not going to be constructing for that, but that's part of the whole drainage of that area.
Okay, thank you. Sure.
Is there any way possible with, sports facility at the high school? It seems building a sports facility 2 miles away from the school eliminates the use of a lot of students to use that facility. And,
Yeah, that's a hard no, unfortunately.
counterintuitive, and that's why, that was the reason, one of the main reasons I voted against the bond issue, because I thought that place for the school being away from the athletic facility was kind of stupid. So,
All right, thank you.
So for those who don't know, the Hazard Field cannot be used for dedicated as a stadium or for the school use. It has a restriction on it from the federal government, which is part of a grant that we took on in the late 70s, early 80s. So we don't have that option, it's all 5 acres. I think even if we had that option, being in the center of the neighborhood, with the amount of cars and where we're lacking parking there, lights, all the things that go with a 8-lane track competition, probably wouldn't be appropriate for that. So we did as a committee review it among multiple other options nearby. And ultimately, over a year's long process, landed on CCMS.
Yes.
I'm sure this has happened, but came to my head. And I've heard it before. Has it ever been looked at, up by the YMCA? There's quite a bit of land still there. And the Y is going to expand for many years, but I don't think that's in their future plans. Last time, a few years back, it was not. But if that could ever be a possibility, that may be a place to look at if it's still feasible and possible.
Bill, I can answer that. We did look at that property, with Coach YMCA, spoke to the executive director, the property was not for sale, it is not for sale.
We also did the raw rock site where the current rec center is, feasibility and like we said, that year-long discussion, go back and forth, and however it occurs for the raw rock also.
So I'm going to give you the opportunity for any comments before we go into the last part of our presentation today.
Pretty much the same concern as before, is accessibility, so that you've got bleachers there, bleachers can't be made so that they're wheelchair accessible. So some things, if there's anything like a broadcast booth or observation room up at the top of the pictures that also should be made accessible. And then, other facilities, public facilities, there's supports for recreation area. Again, there's in consideration for accessibility is dimension in high school.
Understood, thank you.
Then the model. The high school and Curtis Bowman. I believe it's somewhere around $7 million. And so my question has been, for $7 million, we can't find another piece of property in this town that we could put the high school and that like the. I still don't believe that they've done a search for a possibility to put it somewhere else.
I'll try and remember this, because I was the building chair at the time, that we were going through that process, and I just wanted to know it wasn't part of the process. We looked, and for those who don't know, there's timeframes on the monies that come from the Rhode Island Department of Education. That is expired, right? We got in just under the wire. So there's a certain point that you have to decide, are you gonna make the good the enemy of the great? And keep looking, or are you gonna call it, good, and we have a great, what I think, the great option is the existing high school site. So ultimately, we made that decision as a committee, but I want everyone to know, we did look. We looked at options on the athletic facility. We would have preferred to keep everything on the same site. I think that's logical. But ultimately, this is the plan because this is what went on the ride. If this changes, those incentives go away. There is no other sites under the current scenario. So while we appreciate all the input, this is the box we have to work within.
So one of the comments we're gonna talk about on schedule and logistics here about when we may be doing some of this work. So this is a very high level presentation of the schedule. Right now, we're in schematic design. We're looking to have that reconciled around October, November. Then we will continue our additional design and documentation through those other phases that we talked about. The anticipated high school site mobilization is spring of 2025. And the expected high school construction duration is about 24 months. So the demolition of Curtis Corner and the athletic field at Curtis Corner, that's under consideration. And it's continually discussed as we're going through this to see when is the right time to do that. When are we comfortable with the design of the building, the estimate for the building, the design of the site work, the drainage, the cost estimates for that, etc. So the school building committee does a tremendous amount of work in trying to digest all of the information that Gilbane and Left Field and the design team is throwing with them. So at a very high level, this is our schedule of what you can expect over the next year. And as new information evolves, it will be shared. I can go back to this, but some things that I want to make sure that you understand that as we're starting to mobilize on the site in the spring of 2025, there's some things that are guiding principles for us. The safety of the students, the staff, and the community is paramount. We want to make sure the separation of construction activities from the educational activities, make sure we maintain a safe site for drop off and pickup, and that we limit disruption to everybody. Mark from Gilbane, I don't know if you have anything more to add, or Chris or
Let
Left.
me introduce Mark first. So everyone, this is Mark. He's our project manager from Gilbane, our construction manager for the project. Mark lives in town. Mark shops at the same stores that you guys shop at. If we are in any way negatively impacting the traffic or anything like that, then Mark's gonna do it. That was one of the honestly, one of the school building committee took a look at all the construction managers. One of the things that stood out to them about this field bank team was just how many other people live right here in town. And they're accountable, obviously, to any disruptions or anything like that that happen on this project. Mark?
Thank you, Chris. So, yeah, we did take a look at, on what the impacts are gonna be for the school as we build this new school, like what the logistics going to be. We met on site with Phil, I'm sorry, with Chip, the high school principal, and with Brian Mahoney and Terry from left field. We took a look at, how is this going to impact where the school buses are gonna go? How is this going to impact where the parent, student drop-offs are gonna be? Because right now, those are kind of going through where we're gonna need some area for construction. So what we did come up with is and we're still looking at it, but I think the new bus drop-off is gonna be down on the lower parking lot off of Columbia. Down into that main entrance down there, and off of the current bus loop. We originally thought maybe we could do the parent-student drop-off down that same area, but I think the congestion going on all at the same time, the buses and the cars and the parking around the back is gonna be too much. So we're taking a deep dive into possibly taking the student drop-off area where the existing bus drop-off is now. We're working out some details on where that building will lie to see if we can get a temporary path between Hazard and the new building. For cars, one way to go down and drop students off down there.
So I think what the point we're trying to make is that we're being incredibly thoughtful about this. We're thinking about things like noise. We're thinking about things like dust. We're thinking about things about maintenance of traffic. We're thinking about things like when the school has testing days, right? When can we do noisy work? When can we not do noisy work? These are all the things that are going to inform a logistical plan. That logistical plan will be presented in a meeting like this, and we will be asking, again, the community to give us their feedback on a logistical plan as well. But we want you to be sure to walk away from this meeting knowing that we've got people that are invested not only in this project, but are that live in this town, that are taking a look at this logistical plan so that we can come back to this group with something that makes sense for everybody. The neighbors, people that are passing by, the students, the educators, the superintendent and the staff, to make sure that we have over a year, right, to get this right. So there'll be multiple iterations of us developing this and then coming back and saying, hey, what did we get right? What did we not get right? I mean, we're even considering everything from exactly which streets trucks for our project are allowed to go.
Any questions, right?
And one of the things that we will do is we'll take that map that we've created, we'll give it to all of the subcontractors. And as part of their contract, when they sign on to do this work, they have to agree in writing to only use those streets. Those are the type of things that we're thinking about and we're considering as we develop these logistical plans. So things are still in flux, but Mark and I will be coming, and Kathy and Phil, the school building committee, will be coming back to you with a logistical plan, which will show you what we think is the best route, and you guys can tell us where we're wrong.
So I do want to open it up for any comments or concerns you have about the schedule and logistics.
So I'm being very bad here. I'm not asking about the schedules or logistics. Go back to the field in the field house. And what do you mean by in the future? Because are we saying that this stadium gets built and there's no bathrooms, there's no locker rooms, there's no concession stand? Are you saying that maybe the money can be found as you go through the development process and it can be built? Or are you going to be relying on other funds to build it? Like, what's the story with that?
So I will defer to maybe to Brian and Luke on most of that question, but I can tell you what our charge wants to be is to make sure we do no harm when we plan this stadium. That making sure whether it is within 3 years or within 7 years, that we have made appropriate provisions to have a field house that could be small, could be large. And depending upon other sources and other funding and other priorities, we have a space identified for it.
Other bathrooms?
So I'll jump in real quick. So one of the reasons why the field house is a no-go at this point is because Rhode Island Department of Education does not provide any incentives when it comes to a field house. So when we're considering budget and we want to keep it, the project as cost constrained as possible, because the high school is priority, obviously the building. And the costs were escalating. If all of you remember, the past projects were 80 million, 90 million, and now we're at 150. As we went through the process, we tried to be cognizant of that and saying, how can we get a high quality athletic facility first? Knowing we may get other last in money, right? So that last in money would cover potentially field house. So right now we have an $11 million budget for the field complex. We haven't gotten any new estimates on what that real cost will be. If it's under budget, then we may be able to consider some others. As far as bathrooms and facilities, the building committee, I'm sure is aware, and Terry's on the committee, that we need some facilities there. So we're going to be exploring options that within our budget for those accommodations. So we know we need some basic, but to the level that we'll go to will be really dictated by how much money that we have, quote unquote, left over within that $11 million. So I think.
But it's the $11 million, not the 150.
So it's, the 11 million is part of that 150.
Right.
Right, so
But that's
obviously within that,
dedicated to the athletic facility.
correct, so. Just a final talk decision.
Just to follow, and the reason that we built the budget that way was specifically so that we couldn't take away the athletic complex, right? We know. Oftentimes sports programs are some of the first things to get cut, but by building a budget which separated an $11 million contingency specifically for the athletic complex, it allows us to build within that 11 million. Now, what you get for that 11 million is still to be determined, but at the bare minimum, it's as you see it. So it's, obviously necessary facilities, but an 8-lane track, competition level, you guys can meet that. The throwing park, bleachers, stadium, plenty of parking, pickleball courts, what else am I basically looking at there? There'll be some. There'll be some, I saw site, not some site.
Has any thought been given to, when the demolition of Curtis Corner takes place, if you could spare the plumbing for the, present field house and bathrooms, because they're the newest thing over in that entire area. They're not that old. If they could be temporarily used, that might solve the problem, so the track can be used for bathrooms and concession stand until that field house could be built. So if you demolish everything, you tear all the plumbing up, around it, that would negate that idea, but, took care and, spared that plumbing, that might work.
Okay, we'll go back to see if anyone commented on schedule versus logistics. When do the new drop-off accommodations start?
So at the very earliest, the new drop-off accommodations will start at the very earliest. April would be the very, very earliest that the new drop-off accommodations will start. More likely, but probably going to start after school lets out next year, so the end of June, early July of next year. What we're trying to do, and we're still, this is why the schedule is still as it is, right? Why I don't have a schedule, exact dates laid out in front of you, is we're working with the design team, working with Gilbane to see if we can condense the schedule at all. We like to condense the schedule to give more time for movement. There's a whole bunch of reasons why we like to condense the schedule, but we want to make sure that we can do it without sacrificing the quality in terms of the building. So those conversations are still happening, but let's say we can condense the schedule. The earliest that Gilbane would mobilize would be just on Hazard Field to do some work for the underground electrical, and that would be in April. So that would be the very, very earliest. And of course, we would have months to bring those plans out and talk to you guys about that. We plan on having the schedule discussion wrapped up by the end of August. So we'll know exactly when the end of August.
Is occupancy, targeted for
September
2027?
Yes.
Oh, if the school goes over budget to $150 million, then we're looking at $161 million. We're forced to pay for the athletic field. And the other thing too was, if the way the budgeting was done was to ensure that this money was available for the athletics, wouldn't it be wise to do that for other things too, such as making the building sustainable? I mean, rather than just investigating whether it's possible or not, maybe we should be dedicating the fact that this building is going to be net zero, and we make accommodations in other areas of the building to facilitate that.
So it's not that easy. So it has to do with the memorandum of agreement that you got from the Rhode Island Department of Education. The way that the Rhode Island Department of Education reimburses projects is based on a memorandum of agreement. That memorandum of agreement is based on sites. It's not based on political components. So they take a look at, they give you $11 million for the Curtis Corner site. They give you $139 million for the Columbia Road site. It's the memorandum of agreement dictates how the funding structure is built on the project. So does that help at all? I know it's not the answer you're looking for, but that's the way that the Rhode Island Department of Education, the state of Rhode Island, gives you reimbursement, which allows you to do these projects, right? Because South Kingstown could not do this project if it wasn't getting reimbursement from the state of Rhode Island. That's how we develop our budgets, because our budgets have to align with what we submit to the Rhode Island Department of Education as part of our legislative approval process.
So I wanted to just address the first part of the question, which is, will it be $160 million project? No. Within that 150 is contained the building, all escalation costs, contingencies, and the field. So that is our budget that we have to work within. And that's been our commitment to council. As far as the second question goes, it's a good point trying to go into net zero, but as Chris and the entire team here will tell you, it comes at a premium. And it also comes, you don't know that premium until you start dropping, like that's $100,000 potential well that we're gonna drop out here, just to find out if we can do geothermal, right? You don't do that in a schematic design, it has to be done now. So we had discussion, we have to meet certain efficiency standards, which are much higher than where we are now. But there is a cost balance as we have these discussions. It was 2 years of process, going back and forth with the town council, school committee, building committee, to kind of carve out where the sweet spot was on how we get a high quality facility, but also not get it to a point where, quite frankly, it would get voted down, because we're already at a threshold that are, approaching certain bond capacity for the town. So you have to get a project that actually works. So we still have potentials. People have brought up multiple other funding opportunities. That's the other thing we're looking at, is not just trying to put it on the back of the taxpayers, trying to find out what other grants are available. So all that's part of the equation, but I just, I want to emphasize that we're still committed to looking at those concepts. But there is a point where our core goal as a building committee has always been to provide a high quality education facility. That is the core of this project, and that's our tenet. So if we end up with a very high quality facility, a very high quality athletic facility, with some bathrooms and things that we can add on in the future, we would probably consider that additional accomplishment.
Yeah, the sustainability conversation is not lip service. Like we're making a substantial financial commitment to see if geothermal is possible. I think that should assuage some people's fears about whether or not we are truly considering geothermal or any of these other types of sustainable MVP systems. Is that they're making a substantial financial commitment to see if they work. It costs $100,000, so it's important to note that.
So I want to finish with asking if you know where to find additional information online about the project. You don't have to answer. I'll just tell you, if you go anywhere at these 3 sites, you'll be able to find all the information that we have been presenting, will be presenting, etc.
Go ahead. So, we have heard loud and clear, based on feedback, that you currently find SK school project to be somewhat cumbersome. So the project team, although I'm the one who designed and built it, I'm not going to take it personally. consider another construction manager and not a website developer. Anyway, Left Field has hired a professional website builder. They're currently building us a new website. It will be live when school starts, so just wanted to put that out.
So that's it. Any last comments or questions?
And the Bill's one too, Chris is on the website, please reach out to the building committee also. As you guys know, we're made up of town employees, town residents, and people who are putting in the time. To give the town the best project possible for the current students and the future students and for the whole town as a whole. So please reach out to the building committee, email, we have meetings bi-weekly. Chambers here, they're at 8:30 in the morning on Thursdays. For the summer, and then we do Thursday nights during regular school year. So please feel free to reach out to us any questions or come to the meetings. Thanks.
Oh, yeah. So sure, so the project email is skschoolproject@gmail.com. On the website, there's also some very obvious buttons. You can click them to subscribe to regular updates. I'm assuming most of you guys probably get regular updates if you're here. There's also a contact us form. I check it every couple days. And you can also email me personally. It's cspiegel@leftfield.com. So if you want that way, but sign up for updates. We send them out before every school building committee meeting, and for special events such as this, I'll also send out an update, but it's got in case you missed it section, it has links to agendas, it has the agendas themselves, it has all sorts of things on it.
Any closing remarks from town or schools? So thank you for joining us. As I said, this is a continuation of the dialogue and we look forward to seeing you again.
I know. I thought for sure it was gonna be after.
Oh, I thought so too.